At Thanksgiving dinner, my father told me to try living in my car. He said it calmly. No shouting, no drama. Just a verdict delivered across a long oak table covered in turkey, silverware, and people who shared my last name. Daniel, he said, cutting into his meat without looking away from me, if you can't act like a man and hold down something real, maybe the streets will teach you, or your car, whichever comes first. My mother didn't flinch. She adjusted her bracelet like she'd heard something reasonable. My sister, Lauren, took a slow sip of wine, eyes lowered, hiding the smile she thought was subtle. They expected an argument. They expected excuses. They expected me to defend whatever version of me they had decided to believe. Instead, I folded my napkin, set it beside my plate, stood up. The house in suburban Boston was warm, but the air around that table felt colder than the snow outside. My father finally looked satisfied, like he had restored order. Running from responsibility again, he added. I met his eyes for 3 seconds. Not angry, not hurt, just steady. You don't have to worry about me, I said. That was all. Then I grabbed my coat and stepped out into the dark. Snow crunched under my shoes. The front door shut behind me with a dull, final sound. They thought they had just dismissed their failure of a son. They had no idea they had just insulted a man who cleared almost $30 million last year. They didn't know I owned more square footage downtown than the house they were sitting in. They didn't know that while they were toasting my sister's creative genius, I was restructuring cybersecurity infrastructure for half the East Coast. They told me to try living in my car. 3 weeks later, I would own the building that kept their golden child afloat. But that night, I just drove away and I didn't look back. 3 days after Thanksgiving, the silence in my penthouse wasn't empty, it was controlled. From the 52nd floor of a glass tower overlooking Boston Harbor, the city looked like a grid of disciplined light. Clean lines, predictable patterns, systems that made sense. Unlike families, I stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows with a black coffee in my hand. No music, no television, just the low hum of climate control and distant traffic far below. The kind of quiet you earn. In my parents' version of me, I was Daniel the Drifter, the son who never stuck with anything, the kid who dropped out of law school to play with code, the one who refused real work. They told relatives I consulted here and there, that I crashed with friends, that I was figuring things out. They mistook privacy for instability. They mistook silence for weakness. What they didn't know was that I was the founder and majority owner of Sentinel Grid, a cybersecurity infrastructure firm that protected regional banks, medical networks, and 3 major logistics chains across the country. While my father was explaining to the Thanksgiving table how I might need tough love, my systems were monitoring billions of data requests per minute, breaches prevented, ransomware neutralized, contracts renewed. I walked to my desk, steel, glass, no clutter, and woke the monitors. Blue light filled the room as dashboards came alive. Threat matrices, live attack attempts, global server health, control. I logged into my personal banking portal. The numbers updated instantly. Base compensation, performance distributions, equity vesting. Last year's adjusted income wasn't $25 million. After bonuses and stock liquidation, it landed just under 30. I didn't feel pride looking at it, just insulation. Money, when structured correctly, isn't luxury. It's distance. It's the ability to say no without raising your voice. My phone buzzed. A text from my cousin. Mark, your mom's at church group. She's asking for prayers. Told everyone you're unstable. Said you've been bouncing between couches. I stared at the message for a moment. Not angry. Not surprised. This was the family script. If I wasn't failing, then their treatment of me made no sense. So they rewrote the narrative. I had to be unstable, lost, difficult. Otherwise, they were just cruel. I typed back one word: let them. I opened another window on my screen and pulled up commercial property records in the Seaport District. My sister Lauren's pride and joy sat there, the ivory room, her high-concept art space that my parents spoke about like it was the Louvre. Foot traffic reports showed a 37% drop over the last year. Utility liens filed twice in 6 months. Structural maintenance flagged in inspection notes. The public image was champagne and curated lighting. The numbers told a different story. Lauren liked to perform success. I built infrastructure. My father believed I was drifting toward the streets. What he didn't understand was that I had already bought the road, and I was patient, Very patient. The wind off the harbor hit harder that week. Boston in late November doesn't ease into winter. It turns, 3 days after Thanksgiving. The temperature dropped 15 degrees. Inside my family's version of reality, things were heating up. I was at my kitchen island reviewing a threat assessment report when my phone lit up again. Mark, this time it wasn't a text, it was a screenshot. My mother's private Facebook prayer group. The caption read, "Please pray for our son during this difficult season. Daniel is struggling with instability and housing insecurity. We are supporting him from a distance. Sometimes tough love is the only way to guide a grown man back to responsibility." Housing insecurity. I looked around my penthouse. The glass walls, the heated floors, the deed locked in my private safe. Supporting me from a distance, they had perfected it, the art of public virtue layered over private contempt. I zoomed in on the attached photo. It was from college. Finals week. I looked exhausted, unshaven, half asleep in a library chair. They chose that one carefully. If I was unstable, their rejection became discipline. If I was drifting, their cruelty became guidance. It was branding. And my mother understood branding. I closed the image and opened Instagram. Lauren had posted 10 minutes earlier. A professionally shot photo inside the ivory room. Champagne raised, dim lighting. A sculpture behind her that looked more expensive than it probably was. Caption, "Creating culture isn't for the weak. Grateful to be building something meaningful in this city." The comments were full of praise. Visionary. Bold. Iconic. I switched back to the property records. 2 delinquent utility notices. Delayed vendor payments. Outstanding repair citations. Lauren wasn't building culture. She was staging it, and my parents were amplifying the illusion while quietly positioning me as the family disappointment. It wasn't random, it was strategic. If Lauren was the golden child, she needed contrast. If she was brave and visionary, someone had to be unstable. I'd been cast years ago. The scapegoat isn't just blamed, he's necessary. Without him, the story collapses. My phone buzzed again. Another message from Mark. "Dad told Uncle Steve you've been living out of your car since summer." I looked at the black reflection of myself in the glass window. They really believed it. Or maybe they needed to. I typed back, "Understood." That was the thing about narratives. You can fight them with words, or you can dismantle them with leverage. And I was about to discover just how much leverage they'd quietly placed in my hands. Lauren always said she was born different. More sensitive, more creative, less corporate. My parents repeated it like doctrine. She sees the world in a way the rest of us don't. My mother would say. What they meant was, she performed well. The ivory room sat in one of the most expensive stretches of the Seaport District, exposed brick. High ceilings, curated lighting that made everything look intentional. From the outside, it worked. Soft gold signage, minimalist typography. Guests in tailored coats holding stemmed glasses. Inside, the illusion held as long as you didn't look too closely. I pulled deeper reports. Foot traffic analytics over the past 18 months down 37%. Average transaction value unstable. Vendor invoices several marked past due. There was even a structural assessment flagged 6 months ago noting minor foundation settling. Nothing catastrophic yet. But repairs cost money. Real money. Lauren called herself an artistic visionary. But vision without liquidity is theater. My parents loved hosting extended family at the gallery. They would stand near the installations and introduce her like she'd built a museum empire. "This is what courage looks like," my father would say. They never talked about balance sheets. They never mentioned that the building itself wasn't owned outright. It was leased under terms signed 4 years ago, the same year I had supposedly fallen off track in their version of events. Interesting timing. Lauren's success was aesthetic. Mine was structural. She relied on applause. I relied on contracts. She needed validation. I needed control. The contrast wasn't accidental. It never is in families like ours. The golden child shines brighter when the scapegoat looks dim. That was the architecture of it. Lauren built a brand. I built systems. One collapses when the lights go out. The other runs in the dark. I closed the analytics window and leaned back in my chair. If the gallery was stable, none of this would matter. But it wasn't stable. It was stretched, overextended, and quietly vulnerable. The only question was whether that vulnerability would stay theoretical or become mine. The following Monday started like every other high-stakes Monday. Markets opened. Threat dashboards lit up. Overnight breach attempts from Eastern Europe were already being neutralized by the time I finished my first coffee, routine, controlled, until I saw the subject line in my inbox. Urgent notice of default, commercial lease agreement. It wasn't from a client, it was from a property management firm based in New York. I almost deleted it. Almost. Instead, I opened it. The letter was formal, precise. No emotional language, just numbers and timelines. It referenced the ivory room, past due balance, multiple missed payments, risk of lease termination. Then my eyes hit the line that slowed everything down. As the personal guarantor on the lease agreement dated June 14th, 4 years prior. Personal guarantor. I didn't remember signing anything for Lauren. I downloaded the attached PDF. The document opened in a separate window. 32 pages, legal formatting, standard commercial lease structure. I scrolled. Terms, rent schedule, liability clauses. Then I reached the signature page. There it was. My name. Daniel Hayes. Signed in blue digital ink. At first glance, it looked real. The D had the right loop. The tail on the H curved the way mine does. But I've signed thousands of documents in my life. You recognize your own rhythm. This one was wrong. The pressure pattern was too heavy. The spacing slightly off. It was good. But it wasn't mine. I leaned back slowly in my chair. 4 years ago. The same year my father started telling people I had lost direction. The same year Lauren announced she had secured the perfect space for her gallery. I scrolled back up. The total outstanding liability, including arrears and penalties, sat just above $600,000. $600,000. They hadn't just used my name in conversation. They had used it as collateral. 4 years ago, Lauren needed a lease guarantor with strong credit. My father's debt-to-income ratio would never have passed underwriting. Mine would have, at that time. Sentinel Grid had just closed its Series C funding round. My personal financial statements were pristine. So they signed me. Without asking. Without telling me. While publicly presenting me as the unstable son who couldn't commit to anything, I stared at the screen for a long time. Not because I was shocked. Because I wasn't. It made sense. The scapegoat serves a function. He absorbs blame, and he provides utility. If I was a failure, their golden child shined brighter. If I was financially credible, their golden child survived. It was efficient, cold, parasitic. My phone felt heavy in my hand when I picked it up. I dialed Aaron. Corporate attorney. Mergers. Acquisitions. Quiet takeovers. He answered on the second ring. What's going on? I have a lease default tied to my name, I said. Forgery, commercial property, family involved. There was a pause. Send it. I forwarded the file. 10 minutes later. He called back. It's clean forgery, he said. Good replication, but not yours. We can pursue fraud, identity theft, civil and possibly criminal exposure. How long? Years. And it will get ugly. Public filings, depositions, media exposure. Family war on record. I looked at the skyline through the glass. I didn't want noise. I wanted conclusion. What are my other options? I asked. He didn't hesitate. The landlord is a publicly traded REIT. They've been offloading distressed commercial properties. If the asset is weak, they'll sell the debt cheap. Possibly the building itself. I stayed quiet, he continued. You could acquire the note, or the entire property, through Sentinel Holdings. Keep it separate. If I sued, I'd be a victim demanding justice. If I bought the building, I'd be the owner. Ownership is cleaner. Ownership doesn't argue. Ownership enforces. How fast? I asked. If we move with cash, 48 hours for preliminary transfer, 72 for full recording. I didn't need time to think. Do it, I said. Cash offer. Acquire the debt and the structure. You're sure? Yes. Because this wasn't about anger anymore. It wasn't about humiliation at Thanksgiving. It was about control. They signed my name to secure their illusion. They leveraged my credibility while narrating my instability. Now I would leverage their vulnerability. Legally. Quietly. Completely. Aaron exhaled softly. I'll initiate negotiations. I ended the call and looked once more at the forged signature on the screen. Daniel Hayes. 4 years ago, they used my name to hold up their world. In 48 hours, I would own the ground it stood on, and they wouldn't see it coming. 48 hours is a short time in most people's lives. In mine, it's enough to change ownership. Aaron moved fast, so did the REIT. Distressed commercial assets don't inspire loyalty. They inspire liquidation. By Tuesday afternoon, the numbers were on my screen. Acquisition price for the outstanding debt discounted. Full building transfer below long-term market value due to declining commercial performance in the district. Lauren hadn't just defaulted. She had weakened the entire asset profile. I reviewed the purchase structure. Sentinel Holdings would act as the acquiring entity. Clean separation from my operating company. No emotional fingerprints, just paperwork, Aaron called. We can still pursue the fraud case, he said. Even if you acquire the building, you're within statute. I looked out at the harbor again. Cargo ships moving in slow, deliberate lines. No, I said, you're sure? Yes. A lawsuit would make noise, depositions, arguments, public spectacle. It would position me as wounded. I wasn't wounded. I was repositioning. If I sued, I'd be asking a court to correct my family. If I bought the building, I wouldn't need correction. I would become the structure they operated under. There's a difference between revenge and acquisition. Revenge is emotional. Acquisition is strategic. Proceed, I told him. Cash. Close immediately. Wire instructions were exchanged. Escrow initiated. Signatures verified, actual ones this time. By Wednesday morning, the transfer documents were recorded. Deed reassigned. Title updated. Ownership absolute. No announcements, no confrontation. Just a quiet line in a county registry changing hands. Aaron texted, recorded. It's yours. I didn't respond immediately. I sat back in my chair and let the silence settle. 4 years ago, they signed my name without permission. Today, I signed theirs out of control. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt aligned. For the first time since Thanksgiving, the imbalance was corrected. They thought they had found an angel investor. They thought some outsider saw the value in Lauren's vision. They were preparing a small celebration that night at the Ivory Room. Toasting survival. Praising Providence. They believed the universe had rewarded them. In reality, the universe had transferred power, and I was about to walk into a room where everyone thought I was the unstable son who couldn't hold his life together. Except now, I held the deed. By Friday night, the Ivory Room was glowing. Warm light spilled onto the sidewalk. Music filtered through the glass, laughter, glassware clinking. The sound of relief disguised as celebration. Inside, my father stood near the center of the room. One hand wrapped around a crystal flute like he owned the place. To second chances, he said loudly. To unexpected blessings. People nodded, smiled, applauded. Lauren moved through the crowd in a tailored black dress, accepting compliments like oxygen. My mother hovered near the bar, telling anyone who would listen that a private investor had stepped in at the last moment. They saw the potential, she said. They believed in Lauren's vision, an angel investor. That was the phrase they'd chosen. I stood across the street for a moment before walking in. Snow gathered along the curb. My reflection in the window looked calm, controlled. Inside, they looked victorious, like survivors. Like people who had narrowly escaped consequences. They had no idea they weren't saved. They were transferred. My phone vibrated once in my pocket. Aaron. All documents finalized. You're clear to proceed whenever you want. I typed back. Understood. Through the glass, I watched my father lift his glass again. We're still here, he declared. Yes. They were still there. Standing inside a building they believed had been rescued by a stranger. They were thanking fate, thanking God, thanking their own resilience. They didn't know the cannon had already been loaded, and I was about to walk through the door. I pushed open the glass door. The bell above it chimed light. Almost polite, but it cut through the music just enough to turn a few heads. My mother saw me first. Her smile didn't fade slowly. It vanished. Daniel, she said, loud enough for the nearest guests to hear. What are you doing here? I heard there was a celebration, I replied. Didn't want to miss it. Lauren stiffened across the room. She excused herself from a conversation and walked over, heels precise against polished concrete. We have an important guest coming, she said quietly, forcing a tight smile. The investor who bought the building. Tonight isn't really for family, I asked. She didn't answer. My father approached, already irritated. This isn't the time, he said under his breath. You've made your choices. Don't create a scene. Create a scene? Interesting. I'm not here to argue, I said. I just wanted to meet the angel investor. My mother's jaw tightened. They prefer privacy, she said quickly. JLM Holdings is very discreet. JLM Holdings. I let the name hang in the air. Is that what you're calling it? I asked. My father frowned. Calling what JLM Holdings? I repeated evenly. The entity that purchased the debt and the property. Lauren's eyes narrowed. How do you know the name of the holding company? I read public filings, I said. You know I work with data. Well then you know they saved us, she snapped. They bought the building. They bought the debt. Someone saw the value here. Value, I nodded once. Before anyone could say more, the door opened again. Aaron stepped inside. Dark suit, controlled presence, no wasted movement. My father turned immediately, his tone flipping to polished enthusiasm. Mr. Langley, he said, extending a hand. Welcome. We can't thank you enough. Aaron didn't take the hand. He walked past him, past the bar, past the guests, pretending not to listen. He stopped beside me. Mr. Hayes, he said calmly. Loud enough for the room to hear. Everything is finalized. My father blinked. I'm sorry, Aaron turned to him. For clarity, he said, I am not the owner of JLM Holdings. I serve as legal counsel. Silence began spreading outward from the center of the room. The owner, he continued, is already here. He gestured toward me. Daniel Hayes, sole proprietor of JLM Holdings, and, as of Wednesday afternoon, the legal owner of this building. The air shifted. It didn't explode. It collapsed. Lauren's face drained of color. That's not funny, she said. I'm not joking, I replied. My father stared at me like he was recalculating everything he thought he understood. You, he said. That's impossible. It's recorded with the county, Aaron added evenly. The transfer is absolute. My mother's voice came out thin. You don't have that kind of money. I looked at her. You never asked. Lauren shook her head. You're lying. This is some kind of stunt. I stepped forward slightly. I acquired the debt, I said. Then, the property. Clean transfer. Cash. I met my father's eyes. I own this building. The music had stopped at some point. No one had touched it. Guests stood frozen, pretending to study artwork that suddenly felt irrelevant. My father's voice hardened. Why would you do this? Because you forged my name. Because you called me unstable. Because you told people I was living in my car. But I didn't say any of that. Because it was available, I said simply. Lauren's composure cracked first. We have a lease, she said. You can't just... You had a lease, I corrected. Aaron stepped in smoothly. The previous lease was in default, he explained. Additionally, the personal guarantee attached to that lease has been determined fraudulent. That portion is void. My father's head snapped toward me. What personal guarantee? I held his gaze. The one with my forged signature. His face changed, not shock, recognition. He knew. Lauren's voice rose. We never. You did, I said quietly. I didn't raise my tone. I didn't need to. 4 years ago, same year they began telling relatives I had no direction. Same year they secured this space. Silence pressed down harder now. You're not evicting us, my mother whispered. I haven't said that. Hope flickered across their faces. However, I continued. The lease structure has changed. Aaron handed my father a document. Notice of rent adjustment, he said. My father scanned the page. His hands began to tremble. This is wrong, he muttered. It's current market rate, Aaron replied. Based on recent comparable properties. Lauren grabbed the page. $18,000 a month, she choked. We're paying 6. You were paying 6, I said. With a guarantor. Her breathing quickened. There are also outstanding arrears and legal costs totaling approximately $65,000, Aaron added. Due within 7 days to cure default. The room felt smaller. Guests were backing toward the walls. You're destroying us, my mother said. I shook my head once. No. I'm enforcing a contract. My father's voice dropped to something almost pleading. We're family. I looked at him, and for a moment, I saw the Thanksgiving table again. The turkey. The silverware. His voice telling me to try living in my car. I'm addressing a tenant in default, I said. The fact that we share DNA doesn't alter the terms. Lauren's hands were shaking now. We don't have $65,000. Then you have another option, I said calmly. Vacate immediately. No yelling, no threat, just math. The golden lighting of the gallery no longer looked warm. It looked artificial. They stood inside a building they thought was theirs. Inside walls that now answered to me, and for the first time in my life, they understood exactly who I was. No one moved. The room had shifted from celebration to containment. Conversations died mid-sentence. A few guests quietly slipped toward the exit, coats already in hand. No one wanted to be present for the end of a dynasty. My father stared at the rent adjustment notice like it might rewrite itself if he looked long enough. $18,000 a month, he repeated under his breath. Yes, Aaron confirmed. Effective immediately. Lauren's voice cracked. You're punishing us. I shook my head. This isn't punishment. It wasn't anger driving me. It wasn't humiliation from Thanksgiving. Those emotions had already burned out. This is a recalculation. Aaron stepped slightly forward, measured and clinical. The previous lease rate was contingent on the strength of the personal guarantor, he explained. That guarantee is void due to fraud. The lease is now unsecured. For a tenant with 4 months of non-payment, market adjustment is standard. My mother grabbed the edge of the bar to steady herself. We can't pay $18,000 a month, she said. That's not my assessment to make, I replied. I wasn't shouting. I wasn't enjoying this. I was enforcing structure. My father finally looked up at me directly. You're going to throw your own family out into the street. The irony almost made me smile. I'm addressing a commercial tenant who hasn't paid rent in 4 months, I said evenly. The relationship outside this building is irrelevant to the contract inside it. You're heartless, my mother whispered. Maybe, or maybe I had learned from the best. Aaron handed over the second page. This outlines the outstanding arrears, he said. 48,000 in missed payments, plus accrued late fees and legal expenses. Total required to cure default $65,000, due within 7 calendar days. Lauren's breathing became uneven. We don't have that kind of liquidity, she said. We just barely stabilized. No, I corrected. You transferred liability. Silence. My father's posture changed. The confidence was gone. What replaced it was something smaller. What are our options, he asked. Clear, direct, business. There are 2, I said. 1, you wire $65,000 within 7 days and sign the revised lease terms at market rate. And 2, he asked, you vacate immediately. The simplicity of it settled over them like weight. No negotiation, no pleading window, just choices. Lauren's voice turned sharp again. Desperate. You're enjoying this. I met her eyes. No. And that was true. Enjoyment implies emotion. This wasn't emotional. This was correction. 4 years ago, they signed my name to secure this space. They leveraged my credibility while telling the world I had none. Now the leverage had shifted. My mother stepped closer. Daniel, please, she said softly, as if volume could change the structure of reality. We made mistakes. But this will ruin Lauren. I held her gaze. You didn't worry about ruining me. That landed. My father flinched. You told people I was living in my car. I continued. Calm and level. While my name was guaranteeing your lease, no one denied it. Because they couldn't. Aaron checked his watch subtly. We'll expect formal response within 7 days, he said. I looked around the gallery one last time. The curated lighting, the sculptures, the carefully arranged illusion of success. Business is business, I said quietly. My father's jaw tightened. Recognition flickered in his eyes. He had said those exact words to me years ago when I left law school to build Sentinel Grid. No safety net, no support, no understanding, just business. I turned toward the door, behind me. The empire of curated image was collapsing under something far more durable than anger. Paperwork, structure, ownership. As I stepped outside into the cold night air, I didn't feel victorious. I felt aligned. 7 days, that was the timeline. 7 days to find $65,000 and commit to $18,000 a month. Or 7 days until the illusion ended. Either way, this time. I wasn't the one being told to try the streets. 7 days later, I unlocked the front door myself. The bell still chimed, but there was no music behind it. No champagne, no curated laughter, just echo. The ivory room was empty. The artwork was gone. The bar stripped. Track lighting dismantled, leaving faint outlines on the ceiling where illusion used to hang. They had taken everything they could carry. What they couldn't carry was the silence. I walked slowly across the concrete floor. My footsteps sounded different now, sharper. Uninterrupted, Lauren had chosen option 2. They didn't wire the $65,000. They didn't sign the revised lease. They vacated. No dramatic showdown, no last-minute miracle, just a forwarding address filed through their attorney and keys left in a sealed envelope. Aaron met me near the entrance. They're out, he said. No damage. Utilities closed properly. I nodded. Professional to the end. Even in collapse, they cared about appearance. I walked to the front window and stared at the gold vinyl lettering still clinging to the glass. The ivory room, I peeled it off slowly, letter by letter. The adhesive left faint outlines in the shape of something that used to matter. Outside, the seaport traffic moved as usual. People passed without noticing that a small empire had folded overnight. Empires built on narrative fall quietly. No explosions, no headlines, just empty rooms. I stood in the center of the space and let the quiet settle. 4 years of performance, gone in 7 days, not because I destroyed it. Because it was never structurally sound. They told me to try living in my car. Now they were the ones looking for space. And for the first time, there was no story left to rewrite, only consequences. A week after the gallery emptied out, contractors walked through the space with clipboards. No champagne now, no curated lighting, just exposed brick, wiring diagrams, and potential. Aaron stood beside me near the entrance. "You planning to list it?" he asked. "Not yet," I said. Selling it would have been easy. Commercial demand would recover eventually. The numbers would make sense. But this building had already been used once as a monument to ego. I wasn't interested in repeating that. I walked the perimeter slowly. The foundation issue Lauren had ignored was minor, repairable, cosmetic cracks more than structural failure, fixable. Unlike reputation, I stopped near the back wall where a large abstract painting had once hung. "I'm converting it," I said. "To what cyber incubator?" Aaron glanced at me. "For profit eventually." But that wasn't the point. Boston had talent. Young founders, engineers with prototypes and no backing, people with ideas strong enough to survive, but not strong enough to access capital. I knew that space. I'd built Sentinel Grid in borrowed offices and server closets before the funding rounds came. No angel investors, no family safety net, just code and leverage. "This becomes workspace," I continued. Modular desks, secure fiber lines, shared infrastructure, early-stage cybersecurity startups, AI infrastructure, defense-adjacent systems. Aaron nodded slowly. "And you funded I seed the first cohort." He looked at me for a moment. Why, I considered the question. Because destruction without construction is small. Because revenge without elevation is temporary. Because I wasn't interested in simply proving my family wrong. I was interested in building something that didn't depend on them at all. "They turned this place into theater," I said. "I'd rather turn it into infrastructure." Months later, the transformation was complete. Glass-walled conference rooms replaced curated display areas. Servers hummed where sculptures once stood. Whiteboards filled with architecture diagrams covered brick walls that used to hold framed illusions. The building was alive again. Not with applause, with work. Founders in hoodies. Engineers arguing over code. White noise of systems running correctly, real. The sign outside changed too. No gold lettering. Just a simple name, Harbor Grid Labs. I stood across the street one evening and watched lights glowing from inside. It wasn't glamorous. It was solid. Lauren built something people could photograph. I built something people could deploy. One demanded attention. The other created value, and value, when structured correctly, doesn't collapse. Winter settled in quietly that year. No dramatic storms, just clean, sharp air and a sky that looked engineered instead of painted. I stood on the balcony of my penthouse just after sunrise, coffee in my hand. The harbor stretched out in steel blue silence below. My phone hadn't buzzed in weeks. I had blocked their numbers the night after the eviction deadline passed. No final arguments, no emotional closure meeting. Just silence. I didn't know where they moved, didn't ask, didn't check. For the first time in my life, their version of me had no access to mine. From this height, the seaport looked orderly, predictable, measured. Harbor Grid Labs was visible in the distance, red brick against the grid of glass towers, small from up here, but active, alive. Lights already on inside, work starting early. Real work. Thanksgiving replayed in my head sometimes, my father's voice. "If you can't act like a man, maybe the streets will teach you." He thought he was defining me. He thought shame would correct me. He thought authority was volume. He was wrong. I didn't argue that night. I didn't defend myself. I didn't list income numbers or accomplishments. I left. And I built. They tried to cast me as unstable, as drifting, as a son who couldn't hold direction, but direction doesn't require permission. It requires discipline. I took a slow sip of coffee and looked out over the city. I wasn't the unstable son. I wasn't the failure. I wasn't the man they tried to shrink into a narrative that made them comfortable. I was the architect of my own structure, and the foundation I built was reinforced, legally recorded, and entirely mine.